Imagine you have been asked to water the garden at your home or school. What would be your approach to water all the plants effectively and in a timely manner? Now, we have a lot of options to channelize water into the plant roots through various irrigation mechanisms, such as drip irrigation, sprinkler irrigation, and surface irrigation. Let us now look into the history of irrigation and see how an invention in Persia changed the agriculture across the world. 8th century Persia. Farmers used the method of shadoof, which was practiced from 3000 BCE, to irrigate fields. The effort involved a lot of manual labor and farmers spending considerably large amount of their time in channelizing water to the fields for crop production. The Persian wheel, then known as sakia, which was invented in Persia, changed the way irrigation happened. It removed the need for human effort by replacing it with farm animals like oxen and horses. Yield increased because of this invention. Multiple other inventions, ideas and food crops reached the Indian subcontinent in the time period between 700 AD to 1750 AD. Spinning wheels, reportedly came from Iran, replaced the spindles, which was a lengthy and labor-intensive process. Firearms from China gradually replaced the age-old sword, spear, bow and arrow between the 10th and 11th centuries. Eighth century Persia. Farmers used the method of shadoof, which was practiced from 3000 BCE, to irrigate fields. The effort involved a lot of manual labor and farmers spending considerably large amount of their time in channelizing water to the fields for crop production. The Persian wheel, then known as sakia, which was invented in Persia, changed the way irrigation happened. It removed the need for human effort by replacing it with farm animals like oxen and horses. Yield increased because of this invention. Multiple other inventions, ideas and food crops reached the Indian subcontinent in the time period between 700 AD to 1750 AD. Spinning wheels, reportedly came from Iran, replaced the spindles, which was a lengthy and labor-intensive process. Firearms from China gradually replaced the age-old sword, spear, bow and arrow between the 10th and 11th centuries. Crops and beverages also came along with these inventions. The subcontinent welcomed potatoes, corn and chilies from the Portuguese, tea by the British, and coffee from Arabia into their everyday food tables. Ever wondered how these inventions came from different parts of the world to the subcontinent? The period between 700 AD to 1750 AD was of great mobility. People and groups moved from one area to another in search of better opportunities and fertile land. The Indian subcontinent, famous for its wealth, attracted people from all around the world to settle in. An important group of people that arose during this period are known as the Rajputs. Rajputs is derived from the word Rajaputra, meaning son of the ruler. The term was not limited to rulers alone. but to chieftains, soldiers and commanders who have shown a chivalric code of conduct, great valor and sense of loyalty. Other groups of people like the Marathas, the Sikhs, the Jats, the Ahoms and the Kayasthas used the opportunities to become politically important. As more and more groups started to arrive and settle in the subcontinent, there was a huge demand for agricultural land. Forests were cleared for settlement and cultivation. This change forced many forest dwellers to migrate. Some became peasants and others engaged in rearing livestock. Some became artisans and occupied themselves with different jobs. The peasants were influenced by the chieftains, priests, monasteries and the temple. They were becoming part of a large complex society and had to pay taxes for goods and services to local lords. As a result, large social and economic differences arose in the society. People were grouped into jatis or subcastes and ranked based on their occupations and background. The power, influence, and resources controlled by members of each group varied from place to place. Each group framed rules and regulations for their jatis, enforced by an assembly of elders. Described in some areas as the Jati Panchayat, they also followed the rule of the village and together was a small part of the state. We can quickly recap our learnings from this video. India is a home of many religions and faiths since a long time. Some religions evolved in India while many were brought from outside. These religions have survived together for many years as siblings, thus giving India a new identity. As we will see further, in a span of 1000 years, from 700 to 1750, there were many new religious developments in India. Indians were introduced to Islam and Christianity. Other religions like Buddhism, Jainism and Sikhism emerged in this land. During this time, religion became a collective belief than a personal journey as it was before. Around this time, many social and economic organizations were established which had a strong hold on the society and regulated the religious beliefs of common people. Hinduism saw some major changes during this time, like the Brahmins and priests gained more importance, new deities and customs were introduced, and more temples were constructed than before. Do you know why Brahmins got respect in society? It was primarily due to their knowledge of the Sanskrit language, which was difficult for the common people to read and understand. Apart from this, they were also supported by their patrons or new rulers who were looking forward to build their repute in the society. Yet, a very popular belief called bhakti or feeling of love towards one's personal deity emerged during this time in Hinduism. Bhakti enabled devotees to reach to their god or connect with them without depending much on the priests and their cumbersome rituals. While Brahmins tried to govern most of the aspects of society and often came up with challenging customs or beliefs like the caste system, India came face to face with new religions or faiths from outside like Islam. Muslim merchants and settlers introduced Quran to the Indian populace in the 7th century. Unlike Hinduism, Islam believed in one God, Allah, and His sovereignty over the humankind. Muslims believed that Allah embraces all His people with love and bounty, with no regards to their social background. By this time, Islam was patronized and followed by very impactful people like the rulers, the ulema, theologians, and jurists. However, Islam was divided into two principal branches, Shia and Sunni. Shias believed that Prophet Muhammad's son-in-law was the rightful descendant of the faith after him, while Sunnis still considered their early leaders, caliphs and those who came after them as the torchbearers of their faith. With the arrival of new rulers, businessmen, religion and language, the socio-cultural and economic factors that govern a society became more complicated. According to the historians, time is not just every passing year, but a careful account of the social, cultural and economic changes that took place in the past. It also is about how the ideas and beliefs changed, what was the impact of different people and events in shaping the past. This could only be done by dividing the past categorically into different periods based on the characters of events and the changes that occurred over time. British, however, divided the history of India in three periods during the mid-19th century. These were Hindu, Muslims and British, based on the religions followed by various rulers. Nonetheless, this division was not very appropriate, as history also needs to account more important factors like economy, society and culture. Alongside, a careful observation is needed about how these aspects transformed the past. British historians' division also overlooked the diversity of Indian subcontinent that was its identity since time immemorial. Not many historians follow this division. Most of them still consider that the social and economic factors are more important. Thus, the history was divided into one early society formed by hunter-gatherers, origin of faiths, settlements in villages and towns, and formation of kingdoms. Medieval society that saw the rise and fall of various regional empires, emergence of great empires that covered the most of India, changes in Hinduism and arrival of Islam, coming of Britishers or their East India Company. These events, which led to the overall transformation of India during the medieval times, is difficult to cover in one historical unit. For example, people in the 16th and 18th centuries saw very new situations from what prevailed during the 11th and 13th century. During these 1,000 years, the glory of Indian subcontinent traversed beyond its boundaries and attracted Europeans towards this land. Let's rewind the concepts covered in the topic. Do you know that the entire landmass on the Earth formed a big supercontinent called Pangaea many years ago, which got separated into 7 different continents over time? Can you locate India in this supercontinent called Pangaea? Does it resemble the current geographical boundaries of India? Unfortunately, the political boundaries of India changed many times in the past due to multiple invasions. In order to understand this, let's look at these maps of India developed at 2 different times. The first map was made in 1154 CE by the Arab geographer Al-Idrisi. It is a part of the world map he drew in the 12th century. This section shown here is a detail of the Indian subcontinent from land to sea. On the other hand, the second map was made later in 1720 by a French cartographer, Guillaume, in Atlas Do you know that the entire landmass on the Earth formed a big supercontinent called Pangaea many years ago, which got separated into 7 different continents over time? Can you locate India in this supercontinent called Pangaea? Does it resemble the current geographical boundaries of India? Unfortunately, the political boundaries of India changed many times in the past due to multiple invasions. In order to understand this, let's look at these maps of India developed at 2 different times. The first map was made in 1154 CE by the Arab geographer Al-Idrisi. It is a part of the world map he drew in the 12th century. This section shown here is a detail of the Indian subcontinent from land to sea. On the other hand, the second map was made later in 1720 by a French cartographer, Guillaume in Atlas Nouveau. If you notice carefully, both the maps are significantly different, even though these show the same area. Al-Idrisi's map shows South India and Sri Lanka at the top, where we would expect to find North India typically. Also, the language used by Al-Idrisi to name the places on his map is Arabic. You can see some well-known places like Kannauj in Uttar Pradesh, spelt as Kannauj in his map. While the second map is comparatively recent, it was made almost 600 years after Al-Idrisi's map. During this time, the information about the Indian subcontinent had changed vastly. Is it not that the second map looks more familiar to us than the first one? On taking a closer look at the map, you can see that the coastal areas are more detailed than the inland. It is because the European sailors and merchants used this map on their voyages. They reached India through the coasts. Hence, this map charts the coastal areas more accurately than the inland. More importantly, the reason why these maps look different is that the science of cartography differed extensively from 12th to 18th century. Thus, it is very important that historians are sensitive about the history of a place and the contexts in which the information was produced during the past in various documents, maps and texts. As we have seen before how those 2 maps provided a vivid picture of the Indian subcontinent. It is because the situation that prevailed in the past changed with time, and so did the languages, meanings of words, and the records of various events. For example, medieval Persian is noticeably different from modern Persian. Surprisingly, not only the language and grammar, but also the meanings of words changed over time. As an example, let's understand the context in which the term Hindustan was used in the 13th and 16th centuries, and how it is used today. By Hindustan, Minhaj-i a well-known Persian chronicler of the 13th century, meant the areas of Punjab, Haryana, and the lands in the Ganga-Yamuna belt that politically came under the control of Delhi Sultans. The boundaries of this area varied with the extent of the Delhi Sultanate, but it never included southern India at that time. However, today we refer Hindustan as India, the modern nation-state extending from Kashmir till Kerala and Tamil Nadu. To further understand this contrast, in the early 16th century, Babur used the term Hindustan to illustrate the geography, fauna, and the culture of the land. Babur's description of Hindustan was metaphorically very similar to how Amir Khusro mentioned Hind during the 14th century. To draw a parallel, the term Hindustan never meant the political boundary of the nation India as we refer to it today. It symbolized the rich geography and culture of the land. Similarly, many such terms meant different things in the past than their contemporary meanings. Historians, therefore, have to be very careful while using these words. For instance, you must be familiar with the term foreigner used by Indians.
it is used for anyone who is not an Indian today. However, in the past, more precisely during the medieval times, a foreigner was a stranger, someone who did not belong to a society and its culture. To give you an idea, imagine someone who visited a village from the city and is not familiar with the socio-cultural norms of the place. Or a forest dweller arriving at a city might be called a foreigner. However, two peasants who lived in the same village are not foreigners to one another, despite of having different caste or religion. The term Pardesi in Hindi and Ajnabi in Persian would describe such a person closely. Let's revisit some important points we have covered in this topic.
Century, a scholar washed the writing of a previous manuscript that he did not want and copied a new manuscript. We all know that in modern times, most of the written information is available either on the internet or in printed form. But do you think this has always been the case since time immemorial? No. In fact, literal information on pre-modern ages is usually available in books that were written by hand. Such literary sources are called manuscripts. Interestingly, India has a very long history of manuscripts. Long before paper was invented and the printing press made it easier to produce copies, people used to write on dried palm leaves. Some of these manuscripts have survived till date, and the oldest one was found preserved in Nepal. Along with the manuscripts, historians use different sources like coins, inscriptions, architecture, and other written records to study the past. But exactly what sources do they choose? This varies with the period that they are studying and the nature of their investigation. For example, if we study the next 1,000 years after Gupta dynasty, that is from 700 to 1750, we may see some continuity in the series of events recorded by historians, while at times there are some gaps or discontinuity as well. By around 700 CE, paper was easily available, and it slowly replaced other sources of information used by historians. We can understand the value of paper around that time with the help of these examples. In the middle 13th century, a scholar washed the writing of a previous manuscript that he did not want and copied a new manuscript over it. By the 14th century, people considered themselves lucky if they got their food covered in a paper by the shopkeeper. Paper was used to write religious texts, chronicles of the kings, official letters, registers for accounts and taxes, petition records, teachings of the saints, etc. You would be surprised to know that the rich people, kings, temples and monasteries started collecting the manuscripts and other documents in the libraries and archives at that time. Archives are a collection of all official records and historical documents preserved in one place for any use in the future. All governments maintain archives of various official records, data and historical documents from past till now. Hence, there is no doubt that manuscripts and archives became an important and reliable source for the historians to study the past. However, these were difficult to read and comprehend. Sometimes the details that they carried was not accurate or showed some gaps here and there. Let's see why these written records were not completely accurate and reliable to understand history. There was no printing press in India for much of the medieval period. Hence, the manuscripts were generally handwritten. These were further copied or translated by many people. Experts who copied the manuscripts were called scribes. It was difficult to comprehend a previous handwritten document, and often the scribes were left to guess the available information. This introduced small but significant differences in the two manuscripts. Not only this, they also changed a few words and sentences sometimes to add a personal touch to their creation. These gaps increased with time, and multiple versions of the same manuscript were written in different languages by different people. This led to the discontinuity of historical records. Slowly, the same manuscript had substantially different versions from the others, and the original work of the author went missing. Consequently, all that the historians were left to refer were the copies and not the original works. They often had to guess what was originally written by the author. Also, at times, the same author revised his books multiple times. For example, Ziauddin Barani, a famous 14th century chronicler, rewrote his first chronicle within 2 years after it was created in 1356. These two versions were significantly different from one another, and surprisingly, the historians did not know about the original work until the 1960s. It had been hidden in large collections in the library. Apart from this, different styles of writing used by scribes complicated the readability of these manuscripts. This was a common phenomenon in Persian and Arabic records. For instance, the Nastaliq style is cursive, well-spaced, thus it is easier to read than the Shikast style, which is denser and closely spaced, thus making it more difficult to read. Thus, to conclude, the availability of paper from the 8th century onwards greatly facilitated large-scale production of literary accounts, including official documents, manuscripts, etc. Many of these were preserved in court archives and libraries of those periods. Let's revisit some important points covered in this topic.
Indian subcontinent has seen advent of many powerful rulers, from Guptas to Delhi Sultans, Mughals and British. Intermittently, there had been rulers who though ruled only a part of the continent, but they were very strong and glorified, like the Cholas in South. The culture and tradition of the entire subcontinent underwent a sea change with every new ruler. Let's study about this in detail. During the medieval times, Indians were introduced to a new world through various Turkish, Arabs, and Persian incursions from northwestern frontiers. It was followed by the European dominion after Vasco da Gama found a new route to India in 1498. What do you think? Was India always divided into small territories? Or it was united as one vast territory? Well, it constituted many small territories ruled by local rulers or dynasties. But there were times when it got unified as a pan-regional territory under the rules of big empires like Cholas, Tughlaqs and Mughals. Their territories included many regions, thus extending over a vast geography. For example, a Sanskrit Prashasti states that the territory of the Delhi Sultan, Ghiyasuddin Balban, extended from Bengal or Gora in the east to Ghazni or Gajna in Afghanistan in the west. And it covered almost all of south, that is, Dravida region. It also had exaggerated claims that people fled from regions like Kerala, Karnataka, Maharashtra, Gujarat, Andhra and Gora when his army arrived. Around 700 to 1750 many regions in India were having distinct boundaries as well as different languages like Sindhi in Sindh, Lahori in Lahore, Kashmiri in Kashmir, Dwarsamudri in southern Karnataka, Telangana, Gujari in Gujarat, Mulbari in Tamil Nadu, Gauri in Bengal, Awadhi in Uttar Pradesh, and Hindavi around Delhi, as mentioned by the famous poet Amir Khusro. These areas were ruled by various regional dynasties for years. Their expanse was limited to a specific geography. However, these were also unified occasionally under the rules of Cholas, Tughlaqs, Khaljis, and Mughals. When the big empires declined, these regional powers regained their territories, as they had done after the decline of Mughal Empire. However, these imperial rules had intermittently changed the socio-cultural characters of these regions. And by now, they were accustomed to mixed cultures and shared traditions by various big and small rulers who controlled them. In these 1000 years, from 700 to 1750, these regions did not thrive in isolation. Rather, these grew as a part of these vast empires. Being a part of a pan-regional empire, these small territories evolved in terms of their governance, economic matters, culture and languages without losing its uniqueness. Let's summarize what we have learnt in this topic.